Okay, back at it. Issue 17. New issue, new cut, starting with the deal teardown, which I'm starting to gather is everybody's favorites. So
Hmm.
we will jump right in here.
My personal
Look,
favorite.
no doubt. Well, yeah, looking at deals is fun, it turns out. It's like shopping for houses, you know? It's like, ooh, this one has a hot tub. So we're,
Exactly.
we're kicking off with an interior design AI. Just to clarify that a little bit, generative image AI based on large language model or natural kind of language models. It's pitched as a SaaS and it's doing 240K in ARR. And then for a sneak peek at the other cuts of this issue, the operating concept, we're going to look at the four growth frameworks you need to build a $100 million product. The OKR teardown, we're going to lean into launching our first ambassador user generated content campaign. Ooh la
Hmm.
la. And then we'll do a portfolio performance wrap. Sprint five will be right at the tail end of Sprint five because this is going to push into the last week of October. So hopefully we've got some good stuff to report on there.
Idiot.
Good to proceed, K. Lou.
Yes, sir.
All right, no doubt. So deal teardown. My mom's an interior designer. So I actually flipped this to her. I was like, yo, what are your thoughts on this? Like play with this whole universe of tools. But the headline is interior design AI, generative image SaaS at 240K. And kind of the detail from there is profitable SaaS AI app with, as noted, 240K in trailing 12-month revenue and 168 in trailing 12-month profit. Not bad. Not a bad margin there that allows home enthusiasts, interior designers, architects, and real estate agents to redesign rooms in seconds. All they need to do is upload a picture of a room, select the room type, select what room themes they want to generate, and within seconds, they get their redesigned rooms. So, for anybody that's been playing in this world, not a big leap of the imagination to see what they're up to here. Just some headlines. They're asking for a 3x revenue multiple. Profit margins about, I think it's about 68%, but compelling team sizes too. Product stack, super modern, React, Next.js, Postgres, Python, Flask, and then we'll allude to this, a very vague description of computer vision AI models, which who the hell knows what that means. Annual growth rate 10% and founded in, I think it was March of 23. So they've got six
So a couple
months.
months ago.
Yeah, or like whatever. They just got, graduated kindergarten. Performed pretty well on our scorecard, landed at a 2.72 out of 4. Um, Thoughts out of the gate, Kayla.
So I'll give you two sides. I'm glad we have that objective scorecard because at first, emotionally, I said, you know what? It only takes the right kind of people to really turn this into a true SaaS. Because what it is now is not true SaaS. This is just a lucky shot, as you would call it in the trading world. But that was the emotional side. The objective side is this might not be worth the squeeze. So, oh, this just it's too
Tough.
soon, too
It's tough.
quick. The profit seems great, but it's like, is this too good to be true? That's what I'm getting. And when you get that itch, it's like maybe it is.
It probably is, right? And to your point, and we're going to unpack a lot of this stuff as we roll, but we buy profitable, as enduringly profitable as the cliche goes, and generally stable, with stable being a function of consistent margin, consistent retention across customer cohorts, et cetera. So this is
Mhm.
a venture play, kind of at the end of the day, right? So
Yeah.
we don't do venture plays, but I think it's worth a look and it's worth really kind of leaning in to understand it better, nonetheless. So we did industry outlook. And I thought the stuff that was kind of interesting is obviously technology, or it's growing. I mean, interior design is a very interesting market, and architecture obviously globally. It's about $150 billion market now with a CAGR of I think 4.5%. So it's outpacing. It's like right on par with GDP. So kind of interesting growth. I guess it's not retracting, and some of the
And
underpinnings.
I mean, with real world use cases, I just moved this week. The way they got me was with the rendered images of the interior design. You can't rent or buy a place without first seeing something with regards to interior design that tracks when it's all rendering. So I totally get it.
Totally. I mean, just think about anybody who's sold a house. You got to stage a house. Like, right. I mean, like, I think the use case is super straightforward. And in terms of so, I mean, the big thing is like, is the category contracting? No. So I think, we don't want to see explosive growth category. And we're like to get away from, generative AI as like what is obviously an explosive growth category. We're talking about vertical applications, which in this case is interior design. So is the customer, is the end market contracting here? I think we can feel pretty good about it. And then I think what's also a big kind of macro trend that was dropped in here in terms of kind of the future outlook, but obviously I'm working from home. You're working from home for the vast majority, right? The pandemic pulled forward a lot of digital transformation stuff. So I think people probably now need to be more thoughtful about their space beyond the living room, a dining room, the kids' room. Regardless, I think we probably dwell more and are more thoughtful about our spaces than we've ever been.
Yep.
But that's just kind of my subjective opinion. But all in, and then I think the technology integration like VR, and I mean, there were a lot of groups that absolutely spanked it. I'm trying to think about the real estate tech group like VTS. Who are some of the other ones that did 3D? They would take renderings and then you could do 3D tours through homes. Absolutely ripped it. And that
Right.
was a
Yeah.
proper SaaS business they were selling to real estate brokers, and it improved their ability to transact and just basically provide people that were in the market for real estate a more, I guess, IRL experience without the time suck that is running around doing showings.
Yep.
So the
And the cost suck
personalization,
of staging a bunch of places like that takes time and money. And it takes having an eye. So you got to bring in like a full team. Everyone is perfect in a different like area of the room. It's too much.
totally, totally. Cool. Oh, and dude, not gonna say anything about my silk bomber.
I didn't want to ask.
Oh,
Wait,
dude.
is that it?
This is it. Marty got it for me on Poshmark like a year ago, and I forgot about it. It's made of silk. I feel I'm letting St. John just inspire my style right now. And I'm just like, ooh. I was like, podcast coming up. I got to break out the silk bomber. Oh, it's slowly
Hell
getting hot though. So we'll see. And you got to wear it with no shirt, but I didn't want to get it all sweaty. So I got
yep,
a
yep,
little
yep.
undershirt on. Sorry, back to the task at hand. So industry's feeling good. Any hesitation on your side?
No hesitation on my side so far, as it relates to the industry.
Cool. All right, now let's get to business. So I don't think we need to say much about profit margin, but I think it's kind of like it's proof that that what we want to do can be done or it's done now. And I think
Right.
this is a good kind of example of like, hey, it's a simple product, or we can probably make that assumption. Like it's kind of one to two core features, one to two core use cases. So the support burden's probably pretty straightforward or minimal. I'll bet they don't get any support tickets except for like, hey, this thing didn't, shoot out an
Right.
image, and it's like, oh shit, refresh your browser or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and then I don't think there's any reason to think that there's some tech debt here, because sometimes a really juicy profit margin can be deceiving because they're kicking the can on a lot of development costs. So you get in, you're like, yeah, this is a profit machine. And then it's like, oh my God, we have, XYZ $1,000 of technical debt that we need to bake into the P&L over the next 6 months. Now we're running
Right.
at a 20% margin. Dag nabbit. But I think the proof point here is that they're running this with a skeleton crew, and it's
Yeah.
good.
I mean, like I said, this business looks really good on paper, but given that it's only been around for 6 months, if we change that timeline to 2 to 3 years, I would say hands down it wins on every front.
Love it. Love it. All right. So now and then it's so funny because like going through this whole thing, like I don't think there's ever been a write up that was as much of like a backhanded compliment thing the whole time. Like it's like this is great, but it's also could be awful. This is great, but it could be awful. This is awful, but it could be great. It's just like I was like, oh my God, is this making any sense? But like I think on the PLG and the usage based side, so PLG here, thoughts on that? One being no PLG application, four being full PLG. Where does this land in your mind?
Full PLG. Like literally, this is full PLG, especially with just a team of two and a profit margin where it's at. Granted, the churn might be high, but this is purely PLG just by looking at the numbers.
And you can just imagine the flow too. Hi, drop your picture in here. Cool. Click generate. Great. Bye. Like, and
Yeah,
then away
it's
you
like
go, right?
I don't need to hold your hand for that, but blessing and a curse in that. The fact that I don't need to hold your hand and it's so easy and you just use it when you need it. How sticky can I be with you? How long can I keep your attention?
Totally. Um, so I think on one side, and there's really cool freemium components here. It's like, hey, step in, you get 5 credits free. And then they're like, ooh, and it's like, mousetrap, gateway drug, if you want to be a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
cynical. And then it's like, boom, and then then they go. So I think
And then they're waiting until the next dopamine hit.
yeah, totally. So in this case, so beautiful kind of PLG paired with usage-based pricing. The thing that started to get me a little funky, right? And I guess that on the simple side, right, as we had spoken about, that simple products are easy to support, they're easy to articulate, the value propositions are very straightforward. Usually the use cases are clear so you can target the audience. On the other side, they're very rarely sticky. So especially in this situation, right? And sticky is typically a function of what? Like historical data, workflow configuration, integrations across the broader tech stack. This is about as not sticky. This is about as slick as it
Yeah.
gets. And
If
so
we
the
go
thing,
back to one of our, sorry to cut you off, but if we go back to one
oh,
of our initial recordings, this is the difference between a point solution and a platform. This is a point
totally,
solution.
totally. And we talk about how you can plug point solutions into platforms to make them sticky. That's also interesting for exit strategies when you try to position yourself for a strategic.
Yep.
On the other side, and when I'm looking at it, it's like, okay. And I made an assumption here, but it's like, X, Y, Z. Let's just use the example, $19 for 100 credits. And that'll buy you 100 outputs. Maybe
Yep.
that's, different variations of the same thing. Maybe that's totally distinct items. But the bottom line is that this is a coin operated thing. You put
Mhm.
this money in and you get this many things out of it. What's interesting is that this is kind of, and so I guess the business has been positioned as SaaS. And what distinguishes SaaS is a recurring revenue stream. Typically, that's based on a subscription that provides
Right.
access to a web-based technology, right? A web-hosted application of some kind. So this is kind of deceiving because, and then there's some other things that are kind of like little yellow flags or kind of like smoke signals, but they have
Yeah.
a user email list of 1.6 million people.
It's the exact analogy of like an arcade game. You put in your coins, you get this many at bats, and the only way we get this many people in the door is to advertise our asses off. Tons of discounts, tons of incentives. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a SaaS business. It's deceiving.
Or it's like, hey, you can play this arcade game for 2 hours a month for $20, right? But what a lot of these people like in kind of this scenario is it's like this is not a SaaS business. Like when I look at it, this is a pay to play, kind of pay to use it business that should be purely usage based. I think there's maybe
Mhm.
some angles on a platform where it's like, hey, we'll start to store all your images, or we'll start to suggest themes, and then you can start to charge a fee for kind of like a SaaS monthly recurring access. But at this point, it's like I come in
Right.
here, I feed it a prompt with images and whatever, and I get my output, and away I go. And so my take on this is the 1.6 million user emails. There's no way they have 1.6 million month over month recurring users that are paying, even pennies of let alone $19 for kind of like their entry level thing. So it's probably the case. Let's say you're an interior designer. You're like, oh shit, I have this due date for a rendering with this group that I need to do. Boom, let me jump in here. I need 50 of these. Cool. I'll buy the month that comes with 50 credits. I'm done. Cool. I'll come back to it when I need it. Or if you're a consumer,
Yep.
and we go into this because I think there's a ton of decisioning or a ton of testing, I should say, around who the actual ICP is. Because is this meant to augment an interior designer's day and make them faster, more creative, leaner, meaner, and stronger? Or is this for consumers to totally circumvent the need for an interior designer at all? It's like,
Mm.
hey, you don't need an interior designer. Just plop in these prompts and you'll get a beautiful rendering that shows you what the couch looks like on either side.
Right.
Um, so anyway, I look at this and I'm like, it's churning like you got to be churning your subscriptions like crazy. Like maybe the volume of transactions is interesting. And then it comes back to what percentage of your users are repeat users
Yep.
and not as a function of who keep coming back and using credits. I want to know who pays the monthly subscription month over month. Are people upgrading over time because their consumption or their usage is going up? But looking at this right now, it feels very parlor tricky where people come in, buy a monthly subscription, use it, and then they move on.
Yeah, to take it a step further, we've been looking a lot at just support tickets, right? It would be interesting to see who's reaching out to ask for more, who's adding to the
Yeah.
product roadmap and providing true feedback. That's when you start to notice some realms of stickiness. And to your earlier point, this can be converted into true SaaS if we did more due diligence around who the real ICP is. So, to my earlier point on the emotional side, if you had the right players at the helm of this business, it would make sense, but it still seems like something that is just too good to be true.
Yeah. Or and it's like why even introduce a recurring component, right? It's like just sell credits and away you go, and you don't need to think about it. But then the valuation of the business takes a turn, right? Where it's like, hey, this is more now like kind of an e-commerce business where you have people that buy
Yeah,
the
as if a passive income.
yeah, it's like, what percentage of customers are repeat customers? How many transactions did they do on average per year? And then you back into a valuation based on
Right.
that. But this is not like we have customers that sign up, they pay us X per month and they stick around for 2 years because those are the businesses that get the big premiums, right? So
Right.
anywho,
So I would say on your end as an owner, it would come down to you to decide, like for a company like this, do you personally have the liquidity where you just want to invest in this as a passive income revenue stream, or are you actually looking for an exit? If you're looking for the premium payouts, this seems too good to be true. This would be definitely a better passive income play.
totally, or this is going to trade at like a 1.5 or a 2 maybe, but definitely
Yep.
not a 3x.
Yep.
Um, and I think it's interesting that it's at a 3x now. Right. Like it, because I mean, I guess optically you could, and just with, in this market too, it's like, oh my God, a vertically based generative AI that's ripping it in interior design. We've got growth, lean model, margin looks extraordinary. Be like, we want a 10x,
Right.
or something crazy. Or they're like, we want to raise a venture round. And we think, and this is a pre and post valuation thing. We need 8 million to get it to the next thing. We're going to build a platform that actually pivots it towards SaaS. We want to build an API kind of commercial component, which we'll get into, et cetera. But all things considered, first order of business with this deal would be like, I want to see users by cohort, and I want to see what retention looks like over time. Um, and then just looking at transaction volume and trying to back into exactly how consistent and repeatable that is over time.
Yep.
Julio?
Cool.
All right. This one's going to get a little heady. Um, but I think generally speaking, right? Well, let me ask you, computer vision AI models, what specific technology is that?
So that's literally just the process of, let's say, like Stable Fusion, and
Sure.
how ChatGPT uses DALL-E. Like it's literally just borrowing their models, and he's just literally trying to say, I'm not borrowing their models, but they are. The platform's literally integrated to ChatGPT.
Or, I mean, computer vision AI models is like saying laptop computer. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, like there's Apple laptops, there's desktops, like what are we talking about here? So,
like
I think,
when you think about like the verification, when it has you pick those images, which ones are crosswalks?
yeah,
Those are computer vision models.
yeah, totally. The OCR is the most conventional one, and then like natural language processing. And what's crazy? What I always found was, oh, you know what? I didn't include that in this post, but and for the audio, for the listeners, the watchers, every time you get a identify the stoplights, identify the buses, and those are getting more interesting over time. That's literally Google decentralizing training their models. So training
Yep,
their visual recognition models, they basically put and how it's one of the most genius things, honestly, that I've like
dude,
been a
it was called out over a decade ago on the Reddit sub channels. And
yeah.
people thought dudes were crazy. They were conspiracy theorists. No, that's literally how the big businesses have figured out how to integrate their training models for free in real world in real time. That's it.
Yeah. It's like, who are we going to pay to train these models? It's like, well, what if we just put it in front of our users and don't let them get to the thing they want until they do the thing? It's like, well, huh,
Yeah, they got
that
to
would certainly
verify you
work a lot
anyway.
faster. Yeah.
Yeah, fraud is rampant. Let's just, hey, are you a human?
Let's
Do you
do
know
it.
what this image is?
Yes.
Thanks.
It's yes.
Thanks for your participation.
So bananas. So I think
Brilliant.
generally computer vision AI models, and we probably shouldn't assume that they're going to give away like the real sauce of their stack, right? I mean,
They're
that's
not.
I think there's a lot of uh I guess I don't want to say differentiation, but there's an edge that diminishes over time. But how you assemble the Lego blocks to achieve the product execution is definitely you don't want that getting out very much.
Right.
So, and I think the thing to note though is that in this market, I mean, the majority of the micro SaaS products that I've come across are really thin wrappers around the big conventional models. So, like the most classic one is like you have GPT-4 out there somewhere and it's like literally like you put a prompt into a website that claims to be some unique thing, and it literally feeds that prompt directly to GPT-4 and then sends the
Yeah.
exact response back to you. And they're trying to tax the user. They're trying to say that they're doing something novel. And it's like, dude, you just are middlemaning this thing. Like there's
Yeah.
no
That's what
value
everyone's
create.
doing.
Like there's no value creation whatsoever. And it's like, well, this is a thing that's a copywriting thing. And it's like, no, this is a little more structure to an interface that's hitting GPT-4 model or whatever, or ultimately it's hitting Mid-Journey, it's hitting Stable Diffusion if we're talking about the image generation. So there isn't much differentiation. And so I think if the bottom line is if you can, and so I think there's a huge risk for that here, right? Where it could literally be like this is a layer on top of Midjourney. And if anybody's messed with Midjourney, most of the prompts are fed in via Discord, but it could literally
Yep.
be like you go to this firm's website, you drop in a picture of your house or whatever of the room, and you're like, oh, leather couch on the other side of the wall, or however kind of that thing works. It literally drops it into a Discord in Midjourney. Midjourney shits out 4 images and it sends it right back. And they're like, cool, you can pay us our $19 now. And it's
Yep.
like,
Yep.
wait,
The
what?
crazy part,
Yeah,
the crazy part about Midjourney, they did figure out how to create a subscription out of it. Even just to get into the Discord channel, I had to subscribe, and without
yeah,
even dropping an image, I can write one line on, let's say, for example, a website or logo I want to design, and it is pretty spot on. If you
yeah.
want additional versions, you got to upgrade. I'm like, now they're doing it right.
Midjourney's incredible. Oh, I remember the first time I stepped into the Discord too, I was like, you'd hit it with a prompt, and prompting in the visual domain is way more sophisticated. So I'm like, get into one of the little maker things, and it's like backslash imagine, and it's like, and you're getting exposed to all these other people doing entering prompts and creating whatever they're trying to do. And I was like, wow, this
Yep.
is so kind of jarring because my prompt was up here, and then boom, boom, all this other activity, and then I'm trying to find my thing, and I realized that they were socializing the output to get their users to basically force feed train them on how to write more compelling prompts and the variety of the applications. Genius, dude. It was so smooth.
So you and I had that conversation recently. It's why prompt engineering is becoming so prolific, like throughout the industry now. Everyone's getting hired just to be a prompt engineer, but no one's doing it fast enough because it's just one person. You put yourself in a room like a Discord channel where you see how everyone else is creating prompts. You're literally learning in real time, and now they don't have to pay to support you to teach you how to use this thing. You're just teaching each other, and you're
Yeah,
paying a
totally.
subscription because you're gonna hang out there longer because now you're actually building a community of like-minded people. So even if you just pay your credits and leave, you kind of just want to come back to see what the hell other people are doing and
I mean,
saying.
it's entertaining. It's
It
like
is.
it's like my profile photo as Voltron saving the universe from a dragon breathing snow.
Now
And it's
people are
like
commenting and going
yeah,
crazy.
and it's like now I want that in vaporwave. Now I want that in like turn of this like mid-century modern. It's just insane.
Yeah.
So anywho, so I think the risk here with any of these things, and as you start to think about it, it's like, okay, the vast majority of these models are just trained on the internet, period. So we
Period.
should consider that the outputs are probably going to revert to the mean. And the mean is whatever's the most prolific on the internet or whatever the underlying data set is, right? So the so I guess if they're just piping in directly to one of these underlying models, there's not much there that's going to be interesting. Um, where it does start to get interesting is with novel data sets because it's like, hey, we're going to use this badass model that lives out there. We have this proprietary data set that the rest of the world doesn't have. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
take what this model's been pre-trained on and we're going to build on that with this super proprietary stuff. Now, all of a sudden, it's like we've opened up we've added a brain to this machine, and now we can ask it. It's going to give us way more pointed questions than the kind of the commodity brains that are out there,
Right.
right? So it's a function of like a proprietary data set. And then obviously you use that to fine tune the models and away you go. So the thing that they claimed here was that they have a million, or, I can't remember what the exact context was, um, a data set of millions of labeled images specific to the vertical, which we have to assume couch, lazy boy, bing, da bing, da bing, da bing, da bing, da bing, like a
Exactly. All real
million,
estate related.
right? So if they can bring that to the equation and they're using a mid-journey or a stable diffusion, it doesn't matter. That's their secret sauce. Boom, now we can expect differentiated outputs. This starts to get very interesting,
Yeah, that's an IP asset right there.
right? And it's like, okay, cool. This is differentiated. This isn't some like bogus, this isn't like a thinly veiled thing that just wraps around the thing that is
Right.
absolutely ripping like a mid-journey. So, and I think, so now let's change gears and go to um, the risk factors. And I think let's bounce to big tech first, because I think this is kind of an interesting extension of what we spoke about. So it's like, most of the generative AI stuff comes down to the data that models are actually trained on, right? So it's like there's a data thing and then there's the cost to compute. Like, okay, we
Yep.
have basically there's the books and then it's like, how do we pay to have the machine read the books, right? And that's a
Yeah.
function of compute. And obviously NVIDIA is selling the chips that allow the computers to consume and digest this stuff and learn over time. And everybody knows what's happening with NVIDIA's stock price, or just NVIDIA period is like, going to be one of the breakout darlings for sure of this, millennium. I don't know. It's crazy. But anyway, so it comes down to data and then it comes down to compute capacity, right? So, and compute is very costly. And obviously we should expect the cost curve to move down over time and maybe at an even more aggressive rate. Like there's, a bunch of different kind of frameworks and laws there that talk about how those costs come down over time.
A good way
Um,
to compare it is like with crypto. It was expensive to mine crypto in the beginning, and then those costs came down astronomically. It's like now, I'm sorry, astronomically. So now with NVIDIA, it's the same thing. It's expensive, even if you're going to set up like a really fast, let's say EC2 server with GPU processor and AWS. That thing is going to cost you close to 1,000 a month. When we looked at training our own LLM, that was coming up anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000 just on computing costs. It's expensive for the small guy to do it. The big guys, I read something like Google worked with NVIDIA and they had them put together these processors where it came down to them spending close to a few $1 billion
yeah,
because it cost them a few $1,000s to compute for 1 hour with a room full of NVIDIA chips, processing millions, hundreds of millions of rows of data that Google's been collecting for decades. And they spent the last like 20 years building Bard, and it cost them a few $1 billion to do it. It makes sense.
yeah, it totally makes sense. So I think the challenge here is, well, so I think what's interesting is that it's, we could say for now, in like the next 18 to 24 months for sure, very capital intensive to compete on the compute side.
Mm-hmm.
Not great. And we already identified that a proprietary data set is probably your best bet right now to outperform it in a specific vertical. And
Yes.
then you take advantage of the incumbents and you use their paid, you use all their compute, you use their brains and you train them on your stuff. And then you
Yep.
just, carve that slice off for what you're doing. The challenge is that there's economies of scale and there's a situation where, or the incumbents have economies of scale. It's kind of a derivative of economies of scale in this capacity because it's not about production costs and bringing those costs down as your production capacity goes up. In this case, it's like, okay, like let's say Midjourney's like, oh, interior design's interesting. They'd be like, well, why don't we call stock, interior design stockphotos.com and pay them $1 million for every photo that they ever have. And let's train our model on it. And holy shit, this SaaS gets eaten alive over the weekend.
And you just
Like,
answered why it's
poof.
a venture play.
Totally, totally. But and that's a scary place to be. Like, ooh. So anyway, I think big tech in terms of like an incumbent situation, like I think there are some players that are going to have tremendous steam, and
Mm-hmm.
and then the incumbents are going to like kind of twitch a little bit, and poof, they're gone, and they just get swallowed up in a bite. And obviously, that's where you play when you're in a frontier emerging tech play,
Yeah.
and things are very exciting, but the ground's kind of moving underneath you in real time. Cool. So we wrap on the big tech risk factor. You want to move over to validation of product market fit and clear ICP,
Yes, sir.
and then we'll boogie on to quick wins and ops opportunities, and then that'll be a wrap. Cool. So I think we've said it here, right? So I mean, and I think this is pretty straightforward. But like micro SaaS buyouts are distinct from venture, period. And our world revolves around acquiring proven product market fit and then scaling the business by implementing systems, data strategy, and growth loops. And so like stable retention across cohorts, enduring profitability, these are like the hallmarks of, hey, this is a buyout opportunity. Um, that obviously isn't applicable to a business that's 6 months young or less. And so this is obviously a venture play period, just in terms of like the I guess the age of the maturity of the business. And then you think about the category that it's playing in, total frontier, pioneer, I guess paradigm shifting technology type stuff. So that's not great, for us anyway. And then I think in terms of the ideal customer, and we had spoken about this, like he's like, we're selling to consumers, we're selling to interior designers, we're selling to basically anybody who will buy this thing. And
Yeah.
so at the end of the day, and as you get into the SMB category, small mid-sized businesses, B2B kind of blends with B2C. Like B2B in its most conventional definition is an enterprise that you're pitching to CFOs and decision makers and end users and all this other stuff. As you get down into small business, one or two decision makers, and they function a lot like consumers. So it's like
Yep.
prosumer, whatever. But the bottom line is that a B2C sales motion is very different than a B2B sales motion. And I think there's a lot to be determined here between those two things. And that's something typically that we want to come in after it's pretty clear, or at least we have some data that's like, hey, we tried both and here's what we got. You guys can make your own judgment call.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that?
No, simply that focus creates a space for performance, and right now there's lack of focus.
Totally. Totally. So quick wins and opportunities. So I've never been in a position to monetize an API, honestly. And I think that's pretty cool.
This would be the B2B to C play. Because if we can empower the B2B players that, like, let's say the brokerage firms that are now partnered and employing all the interior designers, and they have to do the best job possible getting all these buyers to buy these homes, let's say on a new development. Yeah, we want to integrate into that person's like back end so they can be in the office just going crazy.
So there's some very interesting applications. And the one that I highlighted is very simple. It's like, hey, you go to couches.com, you want to buy a
Yep.
couch at the beginning of kind of that purchase flow, or that buyer journey, if you will. You want the gray or the leather couch? Well, I don't know. Why don't you upload a picture of your living room and we'll show you the gray and the brown and you can decide which one's better. Oh, actually, shit, that you want to try the four cushion couch? Like, right, you can see kind of where it goes. And it's like, cool, every time
Yep.
the customer requests something that hits the API for this firm, boom, we charge a quarter. Bing, 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 bing,
How
whatever.
about this? Let me add to that. Today with Amazon, you're looking at any kind of furniture, they give you the AR, the augmented reality, so you can see it in your living room. We would now just go to Amazon and say, hey, let's take this a step further. You have the AR. What if you can also generate the images for them? Let them design your living room. Done.
Totally. So that's exciting. And obviously that's a high leverage B2B thing where it's like, hey, we're going to sell to Bob's Discount Furniture. We're going to sell to America Furniture Warehouse.
Hey, but
Whoever.
Amazon would be the true B2B to
Yeah,
C because
that's like, you knock down one of those transactions. But anywho, so that's interesting. And
done.
then I think so the headline there is monetize the API, like create a revenue stream around the API. And that, could honestly inform the entire go to market. The other one, and this is in the very much the same vein, and I tried to group them together, but I definitely think they are distinct, is going hard at like a technical integration as a way to not only improve the stickiness of the product as a way to generate
Right,
improve retention, but also as a just tactic to inform go to market purely.
right,
So the example that I have, and usually it's like, okay, our end users is there any kind of like totally established dominant player? So like sales teams, it's like, enterprise sales, it's like, Salesforce. So it's like, boom, we're going to basically integrate our thing into Salesforce in one of the gaps that they have in their functionality. It's then going to become kind of mission critical to our users. And and cool. As long as they stay with Salesforce, we're integrated with their thing. They're not going to pull out. Great. Our retention is now way better than it would have been. And oh, by the way, how are we going to go to market? Well, I don't know. Let's send emails to all the Salesforce users on the planet, and let's have that direct everything. So in this case, and this is not exactly applicable, but Autodesk or AutoCAD is a very sophisticated software that is used
yes,
to mostly by architects, sometimes by interior designers to do floor plans, renderings. It gets very sophisticated, but an opportunity that's like, hey, we're going to buy this business. We're going to go hard at a technical integration with one of these foundational, super prominent technologies that our entire end customer uses. Great. Now, as long as they stick with that, they're going to stick with us. And we now have
yeah.
a highly targeted acquisition kind of guardrails for new users moving forward.
Listen, you made the light bulb go off just now because a lot of interior designers do use AutoCAD. I even used AutoCAD in the back in the day in the computer engineering days. But think about Adobe Creative Cloud. Adobe
Yeah.
has been around for so many decades. They've been trying to encapsulate this whole AI movement to the point where every time a company adds on any kind of AI functionality, they sell it as a separate subscription. So if we were to offer a technical integration to one of these tools, Adobe has acquired Adobe Cooler. They have the full Creative Cloud suite, but no part of it have they figured out the AI side. To plug this in, we would literally be helping them probably accomplish an extra 3 to 5% of the market share with just this. Look how
Yeah.
many people use Adobe. It's a
Well, and
household name.
totally right. And have you played with Firefly yet?
No, I haven't played with Firefly yet.
Oh, it's pretty cool. It's pretty
Hold on,
cool.
let me
And
pull that up.
it's free now. It's like way more structured. So you can be like, hey, I'd take a screenshot of you right now and be like, change the background to a beach, but it's natural language. And then I'd be
Yeah.
like, ooh, but like the use cases are
Oh,
defined. Like you remember when Jasper came out and it was like, is this a Facebook post, blog headline or whatever? And it basically
yeah, yeah.
pushed context into the generative like model kind of prompts. That's what Firefly's doing. I think it's Firefly. It's Fire something.
It's Firefly. I'm on it now. I did actually use it when I was trying Midjourney, but the reason why I stepped away from it and stuck with Midjourney was because Midjourney was actually able to generate the entire landing page website for me. Firefly was good with like just images of people, logos, things like that, but I wasn't getting the
Oh,
full website generated with my prompts.
yo, this literally just said interior design room with a lot of plants.
Literally,
No joke.
that's fucking hilarious,
Oh
dude.
my
Sell the
God.
business. Sell the
Oh,
business to
oh
them.
my God. Jesus, that
There
is
you go.
pretty terrifying. Holy
They're
shit.
finally getting it.
Oh my God. Yeah. This room with a leather couch.
They're finally getting it. Holy
Whoa.
shit.
All right.
No wonder this
Wow.
became such a venture play so quick because all the big boys have jumped into the game and they're starting to figure it out.
Totally. Totally. So boom. So let's summarize it real quick before we look at the kind of
Although we could argue, even though Adobe probably has the largest graphical data set, being that this business is focused with their data set around interior design, there could be a leg up in that regard because it's a niche. The big
yeah.
players they cast a wide net, so there could be a leg up there where there's still an opportunity to sell maybe just the database as an asset, or just sell the whole business.
Well, God, and you just kind of sparked an interesting idea in my mind is and everybody's kind of starting to consider what are the plays right now, right? And it's like obviously there are models now that have the jump, and that's a function of because compute it's like the Benjamin Button companies, right? Like they get better as they get, or like they age backwards. So like Amazon gets better over time because it just
Yep,
harvests data like savage. And so there
yep,
is, I guess you
like
could say,
Google.
a cumulative competitive advantage for like an open AI. It's like, yeah, we've been training these models for 5 years on this much historical content across the entire internet. We scrape the entire internet. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I'll be able to catch up to you. Right. So there's kind of that component, but it's very interesting to think about like and I think obviously they're very interesting data sets like Reddit. And now all those groups are getting very cagey. Like, hey, you can't just come in and scrape this is our data. Like
Yeah, they're all blocking automation now.
Wikipedia, Reddit. I mean, there's some totally bananas data sets out there. The really cool one is now like a Tegas where they're doing expert,
Mm,
it's like a GLG or a alpha sites where they're doing paid expert interviews. And this is huge in private
right.
equity diligence. And it's like, hey, we're going to buy this pharmaceutical company. It treats heart conditions. I want to talk to the 5 best heart
Mm,
surgeons in the country. I'll pay them $500 an hour. Tegas is documenting and transcribing those conversations. And so
holy shit.
yeah, Tigas is sick. It's pricey. I looked at it though. Back in like the raw origination days, I was like, oh my God. And like the LLMs were hitting. I was like, I'm gonna get this data and I'm gonna train models on it, and it's gonna inform a whole investment thesis. And I was like going nuts with it. But
Competitive intelligence isn't cheap. Otherwise, you wouldn't have shows like Billions.
there you go. Well, and so I guess like where I was gonna go with that whole thing is to be thoughtful about like, hey, what are proprietary data sets that exist? I'm going to go out into the world, acquire those data sets, and that's what I would raise capital for. And then once I have them, I'm going to train, the incumbent pre-trained models, and then I'm going to spin up vertical applications. So in this case, it would be like I'm going to hit up Architecture and Design magazine, A&D
Yep.
magazine, and I'll be like, I'll
Yep.
pay you $10 million for or just the ability to use every image you've ever featured in every magazine.
Yeah.
Well, oh
Just
buddy,
plug right into our database. Yeah. That's the
or
most exciting part of this business, that data set.
yeah, totally. So industry outlook looks good. A lot of tailwinds and kind of trends that are conducive to this. On the strength side, solid profit margin. Obviously, 10 out of 10 on the PLG and usage-based pricing thing. But the other side of this is it feels way more transactional and it's like a pure play usage-based pricing versus a SaaS thing. So obviously that would have implications on the repeatability or the sustainability, the predictability of the revenues, which influences valuations. I think there's lots to be concerned around user retention. A lot of kind of yellow flags there. But a strength nonetheless, the PLG and usage-based pricing. We like that. And then into the proprietary data set, they have, XYZ millions of labeled images, which are catered and nuanced to the vertical that they're serving. Could be a huge point of difference, or just a huge kind of strategic differentiator to change our perspective and look at the risk factors. So I think they haven't validated product market fit really, because they're bouncing around between interior designers, consumers, me and you joking around on this call right now. Hey, let's buy a month and, play around with our living room. Are you just moved? Like, shit, I'll pay $19. Like, hey, render up my living room, do a few of these. Obviously the big tech and the incumbents, a lot of this stuff right now is the differentiation is a function of the actual data that you're training the models on. And then your
Mm-hmm.
ability to train them, which is a function of the pace and execution and quality of the training, which is a function of compute. Compute's costly. So again, it kind of comes back to, the differentiation here is probably revolved around that data set. But at the end of the day, the incumbents that have all this compute at their disposal and have the resources to acquire data sets could catch up to you and eat you up real quick. And that
Yep.
stuff's always scary. To wrap up with quick wins and opportunities, monetizing the API is super interesting. Like that could be the entire business model. It's like, hey, we're going to shut down the direct channel thing. We're not selling to interior designers. We're not selling to consumers anymore. We're selling to e-commerce companies. Go, baby, go. Or you go hard into technical integration. You pick the stack that is the most kind of prolific with your target audience, build the integration in there, and then go target that whole category when you go to market. Boom. Anything to add?
No, you covered it best.
Beautiful market comps. We'll blow through these. Asking price, they want 720. The comp is 1.4. That's a 50% haircut. We like it. 3 thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple, they want 3. Market comps out of 5. That's 2 thumbs up. Pretty good. Trailing 12-month profit margins about equal. There was maybe a 15% improvement in this firm versus the comp. Just to state it out loud, this firm's doing 168K. The comp is at 147K. And then growth rate, and honestly, growth rate is take it with such a grain of salt, like, and especially in our comps, because it's self-proclaimed growth. It's like we grew 5,000 times this year, and I adjusted for outliers that way, but uh, comparables are at 48%. This firm's at 10%, so that gets 2 thumbs down. I probably could have given it 1 thumbs down. So all in,
Yeah,
a lot of thumbs up.
I was gonna say the bottom 2 rows, we could easily say, like, you know what, that's so inconclusive because it's only been 6 months. With anything comparable, these companies have had actual tenure, actual longevity to prove out what they're doing. So if we give this other company like another year, I'd be surprised to say, okay, are you still doing a 70% margin or is it now at 50?
Yeah, totally. And obviously, costs will have to scale at some point with users scaling
100%.
at some stage in some
100%.
capacity. And so for this one, I did this up like so in the model we did the kind of all scenario assumptions were 720K purchase price, an entry multiple of 3x, 10% seller's note, which is about 72K, and then we'd bring 20% cash to the deal, which is 144K. And then when we get into the scenarios, the first scenario was median growth and bottom quartile churn. And so I think the headline, like the churn here is probably like 60%.
It's
So
going to be
this is
crazy,
like,
especially
this
with
is
that large 1.6 million list. Like, yeah, that's churn and burn.
like so the disclaimer here is that we went with base rate comps where with bottom quartile churn being about 11.6% month over month. So
Mm-hmm.
this is not a probably accurate representation. We should have juiced churn a lot to like 50 or 60%, but just in the interest of kind of adhering to a base rate comparable driven methodology when we don't know what churn is, because that's
Yeah.
obviously how you want to operate when there are unknowns, and then you go in during due diligence and you validate those assumptions. But um, that was the first scenario. The second one was top quartile growth and bottom quartile churn. So it's like, hey, we grow it okay, and churn is what it is, or hey, we grow the shit out of it, and churn is what it is. What do those 2 scenarios look like? And then the cost structure, I kept it pretty lean. It ended up being 48% of trailing 12-month ARR, but it was engineer, dedicated customer support, and fractional rev ops, and then like 5% spend on marketing. What do those
Mm-hmm.
returns look like? Pretty lit. I'll just summarize with median growth and bottom quartile churn. You're looking at gross proceeds of 671K, a MOIC of 5.6x, and an IRR 95%. For the top quartile growth and bottom quartile churn scenario, those numbers get a lot juicier. We've got 1.8 million gross proceeds, a MOIC of about 14x, and IRR of 176%. So interesting, juicy, compelling, but probably Totally bullshit.
Yeah. Especially for 6 months of data. Yeah. I just looked at the numbers and I just had so many questions. Anything that is inconclusive, run for the hills.
Totally. All right, my dude. Thank you for syncing up on a Friday. And that's, for the love of the game.
For
Amen.
the love of the
Right?
game. We
All
we
right, brother.
don't we
You have
don't
an
complain. We don't worry about when it's rain, sunshine, or snow. For the love of the game, we are here.
no doubt. All right, my friend. You have an outstanding weekend. Best of luck getting over the hurdle with the move and holler at me. Talk to you later.
Absolutely. Take care, player.
Peace.